Ayan, nabulo na naman. Kamusta kayo dyan, mga kameta? Palitan ko lang sana yung entry ko eh. So, iba yung, wala na, bulol na, mali na. Okay, kamusta na kayo dyan? Okay, I hope guys, okay kayo dyan. Medyo, ano na tayo, misty tayo mga kameta. Misty, rainy, etc. May meeting tayo mamaya. So, kailangan ko na umalis na mas maaga. Kaya sabi ko, go na tayo kaagad dito. Mas maaga tayo, mag-meta 1 tayo. Alright? Ayan, nabubulol na. Okay, may konting updates tayo by the way dyan sa DFA, National Security Advisor position among others. May mga bago na naman tayong marites dyan. Hindi, I mean, these are serious. I mean, I have very reliable sources. Marami tayong alam. Oo, marami tayong alam. Alam na this, alright? And then, pag-usapan din natin ang Marcosnomics. Ano mang pwede mangyari under Marcos pagdating sa ating ekonomiya at paano natin ayusin yung sitwasyon sa ating ekonomiya dahil tatay is leaving us with one of the biggest debt levels in our recent history. 16-year high na po yung ating debt to GDP ratio. I'm not even talking about yung absolute terms. I'm talking about even as a share of our economy. Yes, lumaki yung economy natin, pero yung debt as a share of our economy, mas lumaki pa. Diba? So, ang laki ng akyat eh. So, tignan natin ano mga gagawa ng next admin. Kasama din, of course, dyan yung issue ng inflation. Ayan, inflation, medyo nag-upper limit na tayo. Back in the day, 2 to 3%, kayang-kaya natin. Ngayon, umabot ng 5% or so. So, there's some things that we need to discuss. And actually, the reason Marcosnomics ang focus ko today, before tayo pupunta sa mga questions nyo, guys, is because, yes, may article tayo most recently dyan sa Nikkei Asia. So, ito yung parent company ng Financial Times. So, this is the leading global affairs publication, at least sa Japan and Asia, and one of the biggest in the world. So, may sinulat tayo dyan about Marcos economics and how he should get the economics right by getting also the politics right. Kaya, ang title po niya is, ito, na-post ko na dyan sa baba, tingnan nyo. Philippines Marcos must not squander his family's second chance. Fully embracing good governance would be an important first step. But actually, the thrust of this discussion is actually economics. No? Economics po ang pinag-usapan natin dito at how to get the economics right. Now, before I go there, quickly, balikan ko itong issue ng DFA and all kasi mukhang hanggang ngayon wala pa rin clarity. Base dun sa mga review natin, mukhang si Babe Romualdez will stay as ambassador sa Washington, D.C. Again, I'll have to confirm that with some very trusted friends soon. Without naming names. Clarita Carlos, mukhang she's being considered now for National Security Advisor, which is also quite an important position. Ito po yung trabaho ng usually mga generals or people with the military background. So General Esperon is the outgoing National Security Advisor. So maging mahalaga din yung trabaho ni Ma'am Carlos if ever she takes up the position as a National Security Advisor. So DFA, mukhang may iba ang init ng hangin, no? On the one hand, mukhang there is indeed a possibility that Teddy Boy, yan, isa pang boy na naman yan. May Tito Boy, Teddy Boy, Tito Soto, parang, anyway, Teddy Boy might still stay, actually, and he might continue, at least in a transitional form, maybe until next year. And one name that has been popping up out of nowhere, I didn't see that coming, is Harry. Meron yatang chance si Harry Roque ang pwede magkumuha ng position ng Department of Foreign Affairs chief, no? So, I was like, what? Like, okay, so, bati yung mga nagsasabi sa akin, bati sila parang, what? So, ayan, of course, since natalo si Harry, of course, marami siyang mga moves na ginawa doon. Nakita niyo mga meme ni Chavez Singson nakatingin ng ganun tapos sumasayaw si Harry. Alright. Okay, let's be nice. Okay, tapos na elections, umayos tayo. So may 1 year siyang restriction, so hindi siya pwede kumuha na any government position, top government position especially, for 1 year. So there is, I'm not saying final na ito, but one possibility is that Teddy Locsin will stay for 1 year and then Harry R will take over next year. Like, okay, I didn't see that coming. Because the initial one was, Teddy will be out, a career person will come in, or it could be between Babe Romualdez or Clarita Carlos. Now, it seems medyo interesting na kasi mukhang may posibilidad na Harry Roque could become our next foreign secretary. Again, this is just a possibility. It's not a probability. Alright? So, tignan din natin yan. Alright. Anong sinasabi mo dyan? Sinong maarte? Sasha. May double check ko yan. Umayos kaya dito. Alright. So, let's see. So, itong Secretary of Foreign Affairs position ay medyo nagiging interesting. So, let's see kung Harry will indeed be in a contention for that. But I didn't see that coming. Parang interesting. Out of nowhere yan. Di ko napapatulan yung... By the way, ano po yung nangyari kay Ai and ang pangalan ng Daryl Yap, whatever. Anong ginawa nila? Persona ng grata na sila dito sa QC. Ano ginawa nila? Oh my goodness. Ito na nga lang yung mga celebrities na nag-endorse kaya nung elections na persona ng grata pa. Anong ginawa nila doon sa seal ng Ganun ang transition no, from Harry R. to Ai. Anong ginawa nilang latest? Walang yan talaga. Anong ginawa nila? Ba't persona ng grata? Di ko talaga na yun. Di ako makamove on doon, ha? Anong ginawa nila? Talaga yung mga tao na iba dyan, papansin lang sila, no? I mean, there's an old expression. Hindi ko na sabihin. Hindi ko na sabihin, baka ma-hurt. Sige, I wanted to say an old proverb. Galing sa ibang region of the world. Wag na. Mamaya na lang behind the scenes. Sabi ko sa inyo, up na up yan for the world of bloggers and itong mga kaipalan nangyari. Ito yung nakita ko kahapon. Ano to, hindi tuloy ako nakatulog na mabuti. Sabi nito, the Quezon City Council approves Councilor Ivy Lagman's resolution declaring Ai de las Alas and Daryl Yap, both known supporters of the Marcos Duterte tandem. Unit team, no? Persona non grata in the city for disrespecting the city's official seal. Ayan tayo eh. Ano nangyari dito kay Ai? Ano ba yan? Hindi kasi binigyan ng government position kung ano na nang ginagawa siguro ng mga yan. Ewan ko, si Andrew Iba, pwede ba? Pwede bang DND? O ano bang position bigyan kay Andrew? Alright, dapat si Andrew tourism secretary na lang eh. Para ano? Inside Sarah, Duterte, so yan ang magiging natin. National, natin, yung mga tourism, natin, saan doon si Andrew, gano'n. Okay. Now, going back, okay, seryoso na tayo. But honestly, thank you guys for pointing out yung latest dyan kay Ai and Daryl. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, good luck sa ating bansa. Talagang good luck talaga sa atin. Talagang clown show na talaga nangyari sa atin. Okay, now let's get a bit serious, guys. Let's get a little bit serious. Pag-usapan natin ng economics. Medyo British style tayo dyan. Okay, so ito yung article natin sa Nikkei Asia, pakibasa. Alam ko may paywall yan, pati ako hindi ko na mabasa. Pero there's a way daw around it. Sa Google Chrome mo pwede i-check or lagay mo kanya sa Twitter, etc. Tapos lagay mo read, lalabas yan. So ito yung article natin. So tignan nyo, pati ako, paywall ako eh. Alam niya. Ito. So ito yung PISA. Pakibasa nito sa economics about Marcos. So, Philippines Marcos must not squander his family's second chance. Ito, pati ako, na may na-paywall ako, hindi kasi ako nagbabayad dito. Alright. Ito yung meron din isa pang proverb, yung parang, yung gumagawa ng pottery, hindi kumakain sa sariling pottery or something like that. Okay. Anyway, so, the thrust of my argument here is this. Okay, now serious tayo, guys. Let's be a bit serious. Since serious tayo, baka kailangan ko na mag-quote para medyo seryoso tayo. Okay. Ganito. I think there's a big misconception that if you appoint the right technocrats, put the right economists, PhD from good schools or professors from the UP School of Economics, etc., automatically things will be fine kasi bahala na yung mga experts yan, mga adults yan. I remember very well, that was the line of President Duterte when he was running for office. And I remember the first time I saw him was in Makati Business Club. This is 2016, I think March, right? When he gave the speech at Makati Business Club. Ayan, kalat na naman si Tata as usual, talk about, I don't know, may Viagra, tapos yung mga gera, kung ano nang pinag-usapan niya. He talked about anything but economics. And then towards the end, sabi niya, wala akong alam sa economy, huwag kayong mag-alala, bahala na sila, yung mga parang yung mga Benjamin Jokno, Pernia, yung mga ganun types, no? So, ito mga prof sa UP. And then, idea was that, sabi ng mga business community, wow, napakagaling. Yung pala, walang problema eh. Ilalagay ni Digong, yung mga expert dyan, everything will be fine. Well, except, if you have any basic idea about how the world is actually run and how things work, if you have dealt with investors, if you've dealt with Wall Street, etc., you will know that politics matters. If you got bad politics and bad leadership, it poisons economics and even poisons economic policy, if not the technocrats themselves. So let me give you some examples, and this is how I started my article. So I started with 2 quotes. The second one, hindi na lumabas sa final draft kasi medyo mahaba yung article kasi usually I write always over the board. So if the article is like 1,000 words, I write 1,000. So ito yung initial draft. Doon sa initial draft, I quoted 2 technocrats under President Duterte. One, former NEDA Secretary Ernesto Pernia, and 2, Benjamin Jokno, then who was the budget secretary, but now, of course, he's going to take over after his stint at Bangko Sentral. Yan. Tanda na si Daddy. Zaddy. Department of Finance. So, back in 2017, there was a moment whereby parang napataas kami ng kilay kung kailan si Pernia, an economist, a soft-spoken person, he did actually a very good job in terms of making sure yung mga kababalagan ng Chinese investments na hindi papasok. He did many good things throughout the years, in fairness to him, to Prof. Pernia. But he said something very callous and insensitive. He said, yung mga kritisismo ng war on drugs, lalong human rights situation sa Pilipinas, 2017 ito, kasi malala yung situation was, he said, it's nothing but rising political noise which poses uncertainties and risks to the economy. So ang problema niya is not the AJ case or concerns with the human rights, as if you read it, ang problema niya yung pointing out the problem with the human rights. Na noise yan. So dismissing a human rights catastrophe as a political noise, that was very callous. That was very disappointing. Sorry, Sir Pernia, to say it, but I was very disappointed with you saying that. And then later on, meron pa siyang payabang na comment na kinikriticize na yung mga senators ng opposition and all, na parang, wag ka na magsalita, leave it to the technocrats and experts. Parang ako what? So Drilon actually got back at him and warned him, you're a cabinet secretary, umayos ka. We have a right to be fiscalizers and andito kami for checks and balances. So wag kang, parang umayos ka. Ginanon siya. In fairness, after that, to be fair to Sir Pernia, he did a very good job in terms of vetting yung mga investments from China, which had many questionable, you know what, they had many questions attached to them. First of all, maraming mga Chinese companies na gusto pumasok dito were blacklisted by World Bank. There's a report on that by PCIJ, Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. Number 2, okay, mamaya ko na masaya itong biceps natin. Number 2, ayan na naman tayo. Number 2, seryoso tayo. Number 2, interest rates. The concern is that a lot of Chinese investments, long-term interest rates were way higher, sometimes 3-4 times even more higher than the rates we were getting from Japan or some other alternatives. And third, there was a national patrimony concern. So according to Carpi and some others, there were some questionable provisions that could have undermined, medyo ma-debt trap tayo kung saan, kung hindi ka makapagbayad, pwede nila kumuha ng state assets. Again, these were accusations. DOF, in fairness, tried to clarify that. But one person who did a very good job before he resigned was Secretary Pernia. That's why I found these comments very, very disappointing. It's like, pinagsasabi nito? Either wag ka magsalita o magsalita ka, umayos ka, di ba? Wag ganun, di ba? Because this is not rising political noise. This was a human rights catastrophe, right? Thousands of alleged extrajudicial killings. I mean, and obviously, that was bad. And I'll discuss that shortly. Now, a year later, nung nag-aaway si Tatay with Kuwait. Now, let me be very clear. I 100% support us protecting our OFWs by taking a stronger stance dun sa ating labor policy. Lalong-lalo na dapat siguraduhin natin yung mga bayan dyan sa gitnang silangan. O mga kaibigan natin dyan sa Middle East, sa gitnang silangan. Dapat meron tayong bilateral labor agreements. BLA ang tawag po dyan. I know about it because I work in the government before. So I oversaw some of these issues, foreign affairs, etc. So I know about this. And I've advised different administrations, just to be clear about this. No, in different capacities. I'm all for that. Ang thing kasi is, nung year na yon, bigla si Tatay Digong, out of nowhere, nag-travel ban siya sa mga OFW deployments sa Kuwait in the middle of that fight. Now, I completely support President Duterte taking a strong stance in defense of our OFWs. The question always is, what is the best way to do it, right? Now, may mga overseas workers yan na nag-worry na anong mangyari sa kanilang trabaho kung tuloy-tuloy itong away, diplomatic fight between Philippines and Kuwait. And President Duterte's travel ban kung talagang all the way out yan. Alam mo yung sinabi ni Benjamin Jokno? Ito yung stance na, again, this is where you better not say anything kung wala ka rin masabing matino. Ito yung sinabi niya, dun sa mga nagwo-worry. If you work hard and ganito magtrabaho kayo ng mabuti, hindi kayo magugutom sa Pilipinas, essentially. Work hard and you won't go hungry. Yan ang sinabi niya. Again, I'll put all the links there. Don't worry about it. Napakakalos yung ganyan statement. Na parang, hindi kayo mag-OFW dyan. Okay lang yan. Hindi kayo sa Pilipinas. Hindi kayo magugutom. Basta magtrabaho lang kayo. That's very callous. And I mean, I don't know even where to start. So yung mga time na yan, parang umakyat talaga yung parang kilay natin. Parang, what? Pinagsasabi ng mga to. Ito ba yung mga professional technocrats na sinasabi? Tapos ganyan mga kababalagan. Anyway, now, I'm not even gonna go to other situations I personally had, but I'm not gonna even go there. But I'm gonna keep it there. Now, what was the lesson there? So my argument was that these cold-hearted statements were particularly shocking since these were two world-class technocrats. All kudos and respect to both of them, Perny and Jokno. They have done a very good job. They're good professors, etc., who have dedicated their lives to improving the Philippines' economic prospects. So, great. Kudos. But if there's anything that we have learned in recent years is that bad politics can poison economics. And in this case, even yung mga technocrats mo nagkakalat na kung ano-anong sinasabi, because, let me give you some numbers. Let's be clear, data lato, numbers to. In 2017, this is a year into President Duterte's violent drug war, which allegedly claimed thousands of lives of suspected drug dealers. Again, suspected drug dealers. So, hindi proven yan. Ay, hindi natin alam kung anong kalokohan nangyari. Wala namang big fish na totoo. Yung totoong fish, wala. Foreign investment dipped by 90%. And a lot of people, including the Korean Chamber of Commerce here, was raising concerns. Ang concern nila is yung lack of rule of law in the Philippines. Kaya dito, napapakamot ako ng ulo. Nagsasabi, dahil sa drug war, mas maayos na tayo sa rule of law. Paano tayo nasaayos? Sige, sabihin natin, let's grant it for the sake of argument. Bumaba yung mga tambay kanto, etc. Sige, bumaba yung theft, yung mga petty crimes. Pero, tumaas yung murder rates. Tumaas yung deaths under investigation. In what universe is increase in murder rate and a decrease in theft overall means you have more rule of law? Parang common sense, my goodness, where are these people coming from? Right? Not to mention, sinasabi ng iba, that this was an anti-poor policy because the vast majority of the victims actually came from the poorest sectors of society. Ito yung mga tao na walang abogado, walang communicative capabilities to fight for their rights, etc. Yung only time na medyo grabe yung nangyari, nung nahuli na talaga on camera, na pinapatay talaga yung bata na wala naman laban. Walang nanlaban nangyari. Talagang nasa yung ginawa. So, this is the situation. So, we can clearly see there's a correlation, if not the causality, between decline. Kasi, alam mo, kung ikaw investors, tignan mo yung Pilipinas, may kung anong klaseng bansa yan, right and left, may ganon. Kung anong, regardless anong sasabihin ng mga trolls and mga bloggers na yan, that's not what the investors are looking at. Investors are looking at the Philippines, they're saying, my goodness, grabe naman yung situation na to, right and left, may EJK, etc. So that affects their investment decision-making. I know that for a fact because nakakausap ko itong mga big companies and investors from all around the world because they ask experts like us. Sorry, not bloggers. They ask people like us, right, to give them an idea about overall state of the politics. And by the way, hindi kami naninira. They see that on the news, etc. They see the facts for themselves. Hindi sila nagmumukha-uson. Hindi sila nagpo-follow kay okay? Nagpo-follow sila ng mga legitimate news channels. And nakikita nila grabe yung situation. So, noong 2017, nag-dip ng 90%, according to reports. So, I will post all the links, ha? Huwag kayong magsalita dyan. Everything here is backed by data. Hi pala dun sa cousin natin, Marco from Ibiza. Buenos dias, Convarino. And in 2020, the Philippines, ang yabang ngayon nila Duque and all, sinisite yung Nikkei Asia, top 30 tayo, blah, blah, ang yabang nila mag-cite ng 7% growth, 6%. Hello, noong 2020, we had among the deepest recessions in Asia and in the world. Our economy suffered almost a 10% GDP contraction, more than 9%. We're just, together with India, we're among the worst. According to the IMF, the Philippines' growth potential was among the worst affected in the world, right? Along with India and some of the other countries. If titingnan mo yung potential natin to grow at this level before pandemic and after pandemic. So, logically, that means there was something na problematic dun sa response. Tatay Digong was making yabang there na he responded very quickly daw to crisis. Parang, hello, anong sabi ulit nila dun sa travel restrictions on China? Na he doesn't want to hurt their feelings. Come on, we know what's the fact. Come on. And the other thing is this. The IMF did a study on that. one of the problems we had in 2020 is that we had very prolonged, sumobra. Late na nga, tapos sumobra yung lockdowns. Up to one point, according to IMF, up to 70 to 80% of our economic activity was shut down. So there is a clear relationship between the delayed and then overreaction response, OA response, and the massive economic decline we suffered. To put things in context, Indonesia had 3% economic contraction. Vietnam economy grew actually. Taiwanese economy grew actually in 2020. Philippines GDP, it contracted by more than 9%. And there was 5 quarters of contraction. Tapos sasabihin, napakagaling. Good luck sa atin. Alam mo, wala tayong sense of reality and facts. We will always be, magfo-fourth world na tayo at the rate we're going. Honestly, umayos na tayo. So, clearly you see, even if you have the best technocrats and all, if you have bad leadership and bad governance and bad politics, it affects your economics. The two are always related. Kaya nga, nung panahon pa lang na 18th, 19th century, they always said political economy because politics and economics are related to each other. So, porket may matitinong kang technocrats, by the way, some would even question whether these were the best technocrats. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are even better guys out there who are not joining government because ayaw nila makancel, di ba? But, anyway, so clearly the two are related. I can go on and talk about many other cases whereby bad politics affected good economics. Or even good technocrats couldn't do their job. Because, paano ka mag-attract ng investors kung tingin sa'yo, bara-bara yung style ng government mo? Paano ka magkaroon ng economic recovery kung biglang lockdown na sobra? Tapos late pa yung reaction. Anong ginagawa natin nung February, March? Biglang nung nag-lockdown, papuntang April na tayo, biglang overdrive naman, OA naman. So, di ba? Not to mention, if you look at the studies, by the way, the Philippines had one of the, yung ayuda at yung economic stimulus natin was very, how should I put it nicely? It was underwhelming. Let me put it that way. As a share of our GDP and in terms of per capita. So, kinumpara yung Pilipinas sa Brunei, hindi lang Brunei, sorry, sa Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, whatever, yung mga kapitbahay natin. Philippines, yung stimulus program natin to get out of the economic crisis ng pandemic, and yung ayuda per capita, we were barely at the average level of ASEAN. Forget about the world. Just ASEAN level, na dami third world, ang baba natin. So, forget about telling me about good technocrats and all of that. Like, look at it. Bad politics, bad economics. They go hand in hand. Malamang ngayon, mag-grow ka ng 7 to 8% kasi nag-collapse ka ng 10%. When you go so low, the only way is up. But the thing is, hindi pa tayo mag-fully recover until next year pa. Not to mention, may tinatawag ng mga economists na long-term scarring. Ano ibig sabihin yan? Ito yung mga nawawalan ng trabaho sa panahon ng pandemya or ito yung mga nagiging underemployed at it's not clear even if our economy GDP recovers if they'll have their jobs. Because your GDP can recover. GDP is just a measure of the value of goods and services produced within a year. So that's the technical definition. But the ability of people to regain their jobs, employment, and security, that may take longer. So ang tawag dyan ng mga economists is long-term scarring, right? So that is one concern also that we have. So many would argue if we had better leadership, our economics could have been also way better. And to be honest, Philippines per capita income is less than $4,000. It's just $3,000 plus. Lumit pa nga siya dahil sa pandemya and all. Or bad management of the pandemic. Vietnam got even richer, right? Their economy grew and all. By the way, when you assess a country, assess it over 2-3 years, not only last 6 months. Malamang ngayon, Philippines medyo okay na, thank God. But hindi naman pwedeng palpa ka ng 2 years tapos i-point out mo lang yung good ka na yung towards the end, di ba? Kasi parang ganito yun parang nagmamarathon ka or nagsisprint ka, palpak ka sa una, sa number 10 ka, tapos nung nasa number 10 ka, biglang umayos ka na, sa number 8 ka na. But the point is, ba't ka hindi number 1, 2, and 3? You get what I'm saying? Anyway, ay nako, good luck explaining that to people. But, well, I am doing my best. All of this is based on data. I've written on this. Everything is linked. Everything has references. Hindi ito marites. Seryosong bagay na ito. Kaya nga ang sinasabi ko dito, guys, is pagdating kay Marcos, he has to get it right, the politics right, so that the economists that he appointed I won't say they're necessarily 98th percentile. Maybe they're the 90th percentile economists. But some of them are good. Like Balisacan is quite good, right? At least dun sa NEDA position. To do their job. Kasi kung pangit ang politika mo, apektado na rin yung inyong ekonomiya, diba? Because let me give you again analysis. Okay, so why do I think it's important? Sorry, I just had to respond to something. Okay, so let me go to. I'm trying to find my original. Okay, ito, original draft ko kasi mas kompleto ito. All right, so before nung election day, there was actually a survey by Bloomberg. There was a pre-election survey of Bloomberg of top investors and economists, 28 of them. Bongbong Marcos was almost at the same level of Manny Pacquiao, habang Lacson and Lenny and Isko were way higher. Napakababa yung scoring nila kay Marcos Jr., right? And this is ranking by top economists and investors. So now, we can debate about whether he's good or not, but my point is, mababa ang tingin ng mga experts and all dun sa kakayahan ni Marcos when it comes to economics. This is before the election. The investor jitters were actually fully on display in Philippine Stock Exchange. Base sa some data we saw, shortly after his victory became clear, the PSE fell to its lowest in 9 months. Right? So again, this is on Bloomberg. You can check it yourself. If you know the PSE, you know what I'm talking about. In short, there is a perception issue. There's a perception problem here. Right? Kaya kailangan ayusin ito eh. Diba? Guys, these are facts. Please don't shoot the messenger. I'm just being honest about it. These are facts. You can Google it yourself. Huwag kayo makinig dun sa mga junk food bloggers. Wala naman alam mga yan eh. Puro mga bayaran lang yung mga iba dyan. But you see, this is the reality, guys. You have to check, alright? The market response was not very good. Now, I don't agree also dun sa mga taga-kabila na sila, magka-collapse ng economy. No, hindi naman. It's not naman true. Kaya nga sabi ko, Marcos can still get it right. There was some perception issue, etc. Pero naman, pwede ayusin yan if he does the right thing. So, of course, one of the big things that always pops up is yung allegations of $10 billion in ill-gotten wealth, yung reports about yung outstanding real estate tax issues, etc. Medyo malalaking amount ang pinag-usapan natin. Now, of course, sasabihin nila fake news, etc. But the reality is that in the markets, a lot of people have concerns with good governance, not only with the outgoing, but also with the incoming administration. Kaya mahalaga dito, anong gagawin ni Marcos dun sa PCGG, yung Presidential Commission on Good Governance, which of course targeted his family and they were able to retrieve billions of dollars. But still, a lot can be done. Of course, if he approaches this in a wrong way, and you can imagine what that is, then that could undermine business confidence in terms of good governance reforms in the Philippines. But if he does the right thing, he goes against corrupt people, etc., doesn't abolish or defang the PCGG, then maybe that could also look good to the investors and all of that. The other thing also here is yung issue ng parang rule of law. I mean, we have De Lima there languishing in jail for so long based on what? What is your evidence, right? You have yung shutting down of ABS-CBN, which is a big enterprise based on what? Political vendetta concerns? Like, you see, again, you can debate this, but the perception abroad is that these were all political moves. These were not based on rule of law, right? And rule of law matters because investors, when they invest in a country, if there's rule of law, they know their investments are safe, not only for 6 months, not only for 1 year, but for a long period of time. So the more safe they feel in the country, the more there's rule of law, the more they can commit in terms of long-term investments. And when you talk about yung mga investments na high quality at yung mga investments na mataas yung magiging return para sa atin, for instance, manufacturing sector, technological investments, etc., hindi ito yung mga hot money inflow na 3 months, 6 months coming in and out. These are long-term commitments and investments, right? These are long-term commitments and investments. So if walang rule of law, kung napaka-corrupt yung government, or paiba-iba yung corruption rate, or kung hindi masyadong unpredictable, any moment pwede man-nationalize, any moment pwede kang target, any moment pwede kang tawagin ng kaibigan ni oligarch, ganyan. Yung bara-bara style, top investors don't like that. And you look at the Philippines, we have been really, really underperforming. Like in the past 6 years, for instance, ilan ang high-quality FDI investments na pumasok sa Pilipinas? Punta ka sa Vietnam, Thailand, they're creating all the Samsung, LG, iPad in Thailand, all the cars. Bakit hindi sa Pilipinas? Right? There are many factors, but a lot of that also has to do with concerns with rule of law. So these things are not just political, they also affect yung perceptions ng mga investors ukol sa ating bansa. The drug war also has been a big issue. As I showed you in 2017, a year into the drug war, there was a 90% dip in investments. Now, that doesn't mean that it's only because of that, but clearly, as the former head of Korean Chamber of Commerce here, among others, said, there are concerns about rule of law. In fairness naman to Marcos, he has not said anything about abolishing PCGG, although he said something controversially about corruption. Let's forget about the past. Now it's time for me, so that should stop. So he said he'll do something about corruption, pero parang forget about the past. I don't know, okay. But let's see how he's gonna do it with that. But in fairness, at least dito sa issue ng drug war, dun sa interview nila with Tito Boy Abunda, he was quite clear na he wants to recalibrate it. Much more surgical approach, scalpel rather than hammer, use also more public health driven approach. So in that sense, there'll be a recalibration. So that's a good thing. So in short, ito yung sinasabi ko. Sinabi nga ni Senator Amy Marcos, they're grateful for the second chance that was given to them, right? And they suffered daw and blah, 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 and all of that. Okay. All right, obviously they're going to say that. But my point is this, if you're truly grateful, and what you have to do is to make the most out of this second chance. Ito na, kaya na, okay na, panalo na kayo, ito na. Because it's one thing to win an election, and you can do a lot of alamano, talano, whatever to get victory. But once you're in office, you have a responsibility, and you have to get it right. And in this case, very important what they do with the PCGG, what they do with those issues of outstanding this and that, what they do with ABS-CBN, what they do with the Lima, what they do with the drug war. All of these things matter because they reflect fundamentally on the rule of law issue with the Philippines that many investors have. And then, of course, kailangan din ayusin yung mga ibang issues, tweaking our macroeconomic policy. I'll discuss more of that in the future. Balisacan, for instance, wants more PPP projects perhaps rather than the build approach, which is government finance. He wants more focus on health, education. Jokno has his own disagreements with Dominguez on fiscal consolidation. We can talk about that. But my point is that fundamentally, the better the situation of rule of law, and rule of law is not bumaba yung theft, tumaas yung unexplained deaths in EJ case. That's not rule of law, right? In what universe is that rule of law, right? Then, so if you improve the rule of law situation, you also improve the investment attractiveness of the Philippines, right? Again, obviously, hindi naman tayo Switzerland or Norway. We have to get a lot of other things right, basic infrastructure, human capital, labor productivity, but the rule of law issue is also so very important. Kung banana Republican tingin sa bansa mo, the good investors will keep away. Yung mga banana investors will come. Literally and figuratively, right? Okay, now I have to leave soon, guys. Thank you so much for your comments and suggestions and all. I know you have a lot of questions. Nakaipon na tayo ng 1,000 questions since last week, but we're gonna try to narrow down, of course, the questions to the issues that we're raising. So let me do quickly at least some of the questions that you raised. So for instance, on the issue of inflation, two things first. No? One thing we can do about that is revisit yung state subsidy or regulation of our energy and food markets. Kasi isang problema dito sa Pilipinas is napaka-deregulated. So minsan yung mga presyo ng oil, gas, etc., hindi natin alam kung talagang base ito sa legitimate movements legitimate recalibration based on movements in the market, or ayoko na magsalita, but that's why yung anti-competition, yung competition commission is very important. Dapat talaga maano yan. And we have to do something about the deregulation law. Kasi sa ibang bansa meron silang semi-subsidies to make sure yung presyo ng oil and basic goods doesn't jump up very fast when the world market is a little bit jumpy. Wala tayong magawa. May giyera talaga Apektado Russia, apektado, you know what I'm saying? All these oil-producing countries, may gulo So, hindi natin makontrol yan. What we can control is yung subsidies, yung regulation. That's one thing we have to do. And then, of course, over the long run, we have to enhance our food security and also domestic energy resource development. That way, we're less dependent on movements in the foreign international markets, and we can rely more on our own strategic reserves, right, or domestic resources. That's more long-term. So there are other things I can talk about, but very quickly yun ang sagot ko dito, right? So, unfair naman i-blame lahat kay Tatay Digong. Hindi naman niya kasalanan yung giyera nangyari and all of that. Hindi na rin niya kasalanan yung deregulation law. Dati pa yung problema na yan. But something has to be done about this. Alright? Something has to be done about this. Dun kay Lope Sariel, so thank you again for Yenny Mary for that question. Kay Lope Sariel, I think your question in NSA, DFA, and all, medyo nasagot ko na. Alright? Yung Okada, mamaya na yan. Medyo complicated yung issue na yan. Tignan ba natin yung mga updates na mangyayari dyan. Yung Muley, yun nga, I already discussed, diba? Yung mga question ko about economics. But so far, it seems yung priority talaga ni BBM is COVID-19 economic recovery. So parang economics, employment. Yun ang focus niya. Kaya yung economic cluster nila na meeting and they're gonna inject some of the policies and stimulus na kailangan natin doon sa upcoming budget ahead of inauguration pa niya. So that's quite an interesting thing. Alright? Okay guys, sorry I have to leave. I have another meeting, tas traffic pa ngayon and also apologize I cannot stay longer with you guys. But let's continue this conversation, alright? These are serious stuff. There's a lot to discuss. And please basahin niyo yung piece ko on Nikkei Asia. Click it there. I already shared it, I think, more than once. So please check it or check it on Nikkei Asia page. And share me your comments and suggestions and ideas. Let's talk more about this, alright? Best wishes for us. Best wishes to our country. And sana umayos yung iba dyan. Alright? Thank you very much. And thank you also for your stars and support. I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot. Alright? And continue natin. Alam ko medyo minsan hindi kasi tayo parati nagbabardagulan, di ba? Medyo seryoso na itong mga topic na to. So I appreciate that you guys are still paying attention despite that. So thanks to mga friends natin from California, from Toronto, from Quezon City, kahit wala persona ng grata na sila, Thanks to mga friends natin sa Baguio, Ilocos, Solid North, Solid South, Solid Center, Visayas, Palawan, Mindanao, friends natin sa gitnang silangan, sa Middle East, sa Europe. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Dun sa mga mihente ko sa Mexico, kamusta kayo dyan? Alright. Okay, mamaya na rin yung mga 20 pesos na rice. Okay, ang bigas, Yuri, ha? Sana naman, medyo bawasan yung mga populist antics, mga alamano, talano stuff. Kasi this is serious stuff na. Back to serious world na tayo and we have to get these things right. Otherwise, mga gutom ang tao, kawawa naman yung bayan natin. Alright? Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Sana maitutuloy natin itong mga discussion natin in the best way possible. Muchas gracias. Hasta pronto. Hasta mañana. Alright? No problem. Señor, señora, thank you very much. And thank you also to friends. Oh, by the way, Australia. We have a lot of friends in Australia. Thank you very much for joining us, mates. Very good. All across Australia. From Brisbane to New South Wales to Perth. Appreciate it. Considering you guys are 2 hours ahead. So medyo gabi-gabi na sa inyo pag nagme-meta na tayo. E minsan lampas pa, di ba? Kung meta 3 na tayo. Alright? Thank you kay Minerva for your start and support. Thank you kay Marjorie. Ayan, mga supporters natin dyan. Thank you kay Alcel for your support. Thank you kay Tess, kay Kors. Very kind of you. Thank you kay Che. Ayan, maraming comments din si Che. Kay Natasha. You know. Talagang mga mabait to mga Vivian. You know. Talagang mga mabait. Kay Fenny. Kay Yvette, yun, dami mga bait pala sa atin eh. Yan, mga supporters natin dyan, kay Mary, yun. Kay Mary Mansita, yun. Kay Jella, kay Mary Jean, Francisco, sorry, ginawa kong Italiano. Francisco, kay Luz Viminda, yan, medyo mga supporters talaga natin yan. Mga regulars. Talaga para mga regular customers. Regulars natin yan. Kay Rizal Reyes, kay Evinturer Akumen. Yan. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And my question and suggestions, kay please subscribe to my channel. Yung mga ganun, alright? And you will see versions of this also on my different platforms. So please continue to support us. And maraming salamat. Thank you very much also tayo kay Rachel Harrison for your support. Friends natin dyan sa Baguio. Thank you very much for joining us. Kay Jella. Yan. So, tayo dyan, guys. Fake moves. Fight. Yan. Alright? Okay.